I am 84 years old, and most of what I remember now comes to me in silence. That's fitting, I suppose. Silence is what I lived in for most of my marriage, and it is what ruined it. When you get to my age, the house makes different sounds. The refrigerator hums louder. The floorboards settle at night. The clock on the wall sounds like it's counting down something personal. There is no one in the next room clearing their throat. No one folding laundry. No one asking if I've seen their glasses. My wife, Margaret, has been gone for 3 years. I don't tell this story because I think it will change anything for me. It won't. I tell it because I used to believe that staying quiet was the same as keeping the peace. I was wrong about that. It took me 50 years to understand it properly. When I was young, I thought a good husband was a steady one, a man who worked, who didn't complain, who didn't cause trouble. My own father rarely spoke unless he had to. My mother would talk around him, not to him. That was marriage, as far as I knew. I met Margaret when I was 26. She was 23 and quicker with words than I ever was. She laughed easily. She filled space. I admired that. On our third date, she told me about her childhood in such detail I could picture the wallpaper in her parents' kitchen. I didn't offer much about myself, not because I was hiding anything. I just didn't think it mattered. I thought what mattered was showing up, paying bills on time, not straying, not drinking too much. I thought love was proven by endurance. We married within a year. The first apartment we had was small and always a little cold. There was a draft near the window. Margaret would talk while she cooked. She'd tell me about the neighbor upstairs or something she'd read in the paper. I'd nod, eat, say, "That's something," and let it pass. She would ask me how my day was. "Fine," I'd say, "busy." That was usually the end of it. I wasn't unhappy. That's important. I didn't feel deprived. I felt responsible. I felt grown. I worked at an insurance office then. Long hours, paperwork stacked high, supervisors who liked men who kept their heads down. I kept my head down at home too. When she cried the first time in front of me, I remember feeling uncomfortable more than concerned. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know what to say. Her grandmother had died. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her face in her hands. I stood there for a moment. Then I put my hand on her shoulder and said, "She lived a long life." It sounded reasonable to me. Margaret looked up at me like she was waiting for something else. I didn't know what that something was. We had 2 children, a boy and then a girl. Life filled up with schedules and noise and school events. I attended most of them. I was present in the physical sense. I sat in folding chairs at school plays. I clapped. I took photographs with a camera that needed film. Margaret did the talking. She talked to teachers, to other parents, to the children when they were upset. I handled practical things. I fixed the sink. I paid for braces. I drove them to practice when she was tired. There were arguments, of course. They were always about the same thing. "You don't tell me anything," she'd say. "There's nothing to tell," I'd answer. "You don't let me in. I'm right here." I truly believed that was enough. I was right there. I didn't see that I was standing just outside the door. As the years went on, she stopped asking as many questions. That felt like relief at first. Less pressure, fewer conversations I didn't know how to navigate. But the house grew quieter in a different way. We would sit in the living room in the evenings, the television on. She would glance at me sometimes, like she was measuring the distance. I told myself this was what long marriages looked like. Comfortable, calm, no shouting, no drama. I mistook the absence of noise for closeness. In my 40s, work became heavier. I was promoted. More responsibility, more late nights. I would come home tired and grateful that she didn't demand much from me. She began going out with friends more often, book clubs, church gatherings, dinners I didn't attend. She would come home and tell me about them. I would listen, or at least I thought I was listening. Sometimes she would pause mid-story and say, "Do you ever think about us?" I'd say, "Of course I do." But I never explained what that meant. I never described my thoughts. I never said that I noticed the way her hair had begun to gray at the temples, or that I still felt steadier when she was in the room. I felt those things. I just didn't speak them. There is a kind of arrogance in assuming someone knows how you feel without hearing it. I see that now. Our children grew up and moved out. The house emptied in a practical way first. Bedrooms unused, fewer dishes in the sink. Margaret tried to talk more then. I think she felt the space too. She would bring up memories. "Do you remember when we drove to the lake and got lost?" I did remember. I would say, "Yes, that was a long drive." She would look at me, waiting for more. Something about how I had been scared we'd run out of gas. Something about how beautiful she looked laughing in that small roadside diner. I kept those details to myself. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. Or fear of sounding foolish. In our 60s, she began sleeping closer to the edge of the bed. Not dramatically. Just a few inches more each year. One night she said, very quietly, "I feel alone, even when you're here." That should have shaken me. Instead, I felt accused. "I've always been here," I said. She nodded. "Yes, you have." There are moments in a life that don't seem like turning points until you look back. That was one of them. We didn't separate. We didn't shout. We carried on. Vacations, holidays, visits from the grandchildren. To anyone looking from the outside, we were steady, reliable, a long marriage. Inside, there were rooms we never entered together. When she was 79, Margaret was diagnosed with a heart condition. It wasn't sudden. There were appointments, medications, words from doctors that sounded manageable. We had time, they said. I believed them. In those months, she grew more direct, less patient with my quiet. "Tell me something real," she said one afternoon while we sat in the bedroom. Sunlight through the curtains. "I don't know what you mean," I replied. She looked tired. "Anything, what you're afraid of, what you regret, what you feel." I felt many things. Fear of losing her. Shame that I had never given her what she was asking for. Confusion about how to start after so many years. What I said was, "You'll be fine. The doctor said so." She turned her face toward the window. A week before she died, we were alone in this house. She was weaker by then, breathing slower. I sat beside the bed in an armchair that still stands in the same place. She reached for my hand. "I needed you," she said, not angrily, just stating something. "I'm here," I answered again. She squeezed my hand. "I know, but I needed to hear you." That was the closest she came to explaining it plainly. I opened my mouth then. I tried. Words felt thick, unpracticed. "I loved you," I said. It sounded small in the room. She smiled, but there was something in her eyes that told me it had arrived too late to repair what had worn down over decades. She died 2 days later. The house has been silent in an honest way ever since. What is permanently lost is not just her presence. It is the version of us that could have existed if I had spoken. The conversations we never had. The comfort she might have felt. The warmth that might have filled these rooms differently. Time cannot be reclaimed. It does not circle back so you can try again with better words. I replay ordinary evenings now. The kitchen table, the living room sofa, the way she would wait half a second longer after asking me something. I see it clearly. The invitations I declined without knowing. Silence is not neutral. It does not simply sit there. It builds. It shapes the air between two people. I thought I was protecting us from conflict, from unnecessary emotion. What I did was protect myself from vulnerability. If you are listening to me and you still have someone sitting across from you at the dinner table, I won't tell you what to do. I have no authority for that. I will only tell you what I wish I had understood. There is no reward for withholding your inner life. No prize for being the calm one who never reveals doubt or tenderness. The people who love you are not mind readers. They cannot live on assumptions. I believed there would always be more time to say the deeper things, that one day I would sit down and explain myself fully. That day never seemed urgent. Now urgency is all I have, and there is no one here to receive it. I am 84 years old. I move slowly through these rooms. Sometimes I speak out loud just to hear a voice. I loved you, I say again, as if the walls might carry it somewhere. Silence answers back. I do not expect forgiveness from the past. I do not even ask for it. I sit with what I understand now. Silence can ruin a marriage, not in a dramatic explosion, not in a single argument. It does it quietly, politely, year after year, until two people are living side by side but not together. If I have any time left, it will be spent remembering her voice. It filled the spaces I left empty. I see that clearly now, and clarity at this age is a heavy thing to hold.